everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Beneath the Lift Town. My name's Charles McGillivray, and as always, I'm joined by Jess Keble and Simon Stacey. We're a fans podcast by fans for fans of Northampton Saints. How are you both doing?
No comment.
Good, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, let's stick to Saints. I mean, it's a frustration one, isn't there? Like, you almost have to take a step back and go, like, we were frustrated because of the capability and what we felt this team could do. You know, going away to Exeter in the cup where they've gone pretty strong is always going to be a really tough ask. But we really felt, this team has played so well together that we felt confident they could go and do it. And then to be in that position and just, not, my words are, not really fire any shots and just not really deliver what we know they're capable of is a real disappointment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I will say one thing though. It's. I would not be happy. No offense to the Exeter fans, but I would not be happy watching that rugby week in, week out. It's the most boring. I'm so glad we are Saints fans because the boys obviously didn't put it on at the weekend, but yeah, we just didn't turn up, did we? Really? And it's just a shame because it would have been a derby, wouldn't it? At Bad Road, which would have been fun.
Yeah. I think we can get into a few reasons of what didn't work out, but it promised so much and delivered so little. It's the short summary, isn't it?
Thing is, on the one hand, I know we think back on the Saracens game as like an incredible game with an incredible finish, but the reality was that for about 70 minutes of that game, we weren't that great either. Like, we weren't really firing on any kind of cylinders whatsoever until literally Hendy came on and did magic for the last like 6 minutes. So, the reality was I actually felt we played quite similar to a lot of the ways we played the week before. And sort of lackluster. I think there's a few players. I think the centres, both Rory and Litch put really, really good performances in from start to finish. But outside of we just couldn't, and it's a combination of a couple of things really. Like, Exeter's defence was really strong, we just couldn't unpick it for whatever reason. Like, they fronted up in that aspect, we just really, really couldn't get through. And then I think also probably a combination of, that's a big injury to Hendy on the day. Kemeny has to go off, fails a HIA, you end up having to do a bit of swapping around. You probably combine that with they hadn't played that great. It was a new sort of team from what we'd seen previously last week as well, with some people coming back in, and some people just are not quite firing on the levels that I'm sure they will be once we get back into the Prem and they've played a bit more. But yeah, it was a frustrating watch. But I suppose you look back on the whole block, both of the blocks really, and didn't lift the trophy or even be able to have a chance to do so. But it's still, I think, a really successful block in terms of what we've seen from players that have stepped up, put good performances in, made really good names for themselves. I think I saw just before I came on here that Jack Lewis is player of the month this month after his really good performances in the PRC. So there's still, I'd say it's still a net positive in terms of what to take away from it. But yeah, it's definitely frustrating. But I think it's also hard to argue that the best two teams have made it to the final this weekend. The ones that have performed the best across overall. But yeah, definitely a disappointing day considering the day before. So all in all, it wasn't the most successful rugby weekend I've ever experienced in my life, but hey-ho.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few, like, performance-wise and things and stuff, and I think one goes back, you said it to last week, where I'm not pinpointing a player, I'm not putting blame on anything. I don't think anyone performed particularly to the levels that we expect them to perform to, or we know they can perform to even. But, someone like Anthony Bellew obviously missed out last week, and is that whether that's because Furbank got dropped in, so they felt, well, we want Pater to get the game time because we want to develop him, and therefore they won't be Pater at 10 and Furbank at 15, and therefore Bellew missed out. But then he came into that game away at Exeter, having not played in a couple of weeks, and we've seen him a few times, I think, where they've dropped him in and he struggled a bit, and because it's such a hard task, isn't it, to come in at 10, not being in the team, not been playing, not been getting any form, and just suddenly go and like he didn't. We definitely didn't see what we know he can deliver from the Bellew we saw at points in the season when he's had a run of games and looked really good. He was non-existent, and then when you get Archie, who's been really great, wasn't able to impose himself from the game. I'm not actually saying he played badly. I'm just saying he didn't impose himself in the way we know he can, and so suddenly it's like nothing was clicking and nothing was functioning because our halves weren't getting that control. And I think you then go back to the base root of that, and it's like, well, Chiefs barred up, didn't they? We just weren't winning collisions. We weren't getting on the front foot. You sort of think, oh well, JJ's on the pitch, so we're going to win collisions, but they absolutely got on top of him. Yeah, there might have been a few occasions where they had to commit quite a few players to do that, but they did it and managed to get through that. The Litchfield try came purely off the back of them having to commit numbers to dealing with JJ in his charge, but then other points in the game they seem to do really well at committing those numbers, but then getting numbers in the line, and they just sort of outfought us and outthought in both with an F and with a TH. They outthought us and they outfought us. It was it wasn't the. And we know that this side is better when it comes up with when it bars up, fronts up, wins collisions, and gives the talented backs the ability to go out and play. And it didn't. That first point didn't happen either.
Yeah, it's disappointing as well that some of the talent you'd have really liked to see and it couldn't be in it. Like the commentators had also made the point of like having the under-20s Six Nations at the same time just seems like not the smartest choice. Like they were very open of like they'd said and very open about this team that you could have it at any time. You could have it after. It doesn't have to line up with. There's absolutely no reason that tournament has to line up because it's not like you have the women's tournament at the same time or anything. Like there's absolutely no reason realistically. And I'd say it's the worst time to have it because you want them to be, to make your case for playing for things like under 20s, you want to be playing in the PRC. That's sort of the whole point of it. Yeah. I'd have just really loved to have seen like Pay to be able to play in that fixture just because of how well he's playing across the whole block. Like he'd have probably relished being. I'm not saying he didn't relish to playing for England under 20s. I don't mean it in that way, but if they were at different times, he'd have absolutely relished being able to play in a semi-final of a tournament.
Yeah, but you literally just said what I was exactly saying, exactly the same thing. Why don't they just move it to when the women's Six Nations is on, and then there's no conflict because those young lads, like we struggle. I'm not blaming the selections because we've got internationals away, but we had to get. Was it 2 loan props from Cardiff, didn't we? So we were really weak at prop because obviously we got how many, God knows how many away with Scotland and England, and then you've got the young boys away with under 20s. So
yeah, but it's not an England decision, is it? Like none of the other nations are necessarily having these competitions at the same time, and therefore, like it's a problem that only affects England because they've elected to have a PRC competition in that block.
Yeah.
Like the Welsh and the French and the Italians don't have that issue, so it's not in their interest to do that, is it?
I guess.
Okay. But yeah, there's just, to me there was never, and also you kind of. It kind of deserves to have its own attention on it as well, really. I feel like it doesn't get that either when it's at this. The under-20s doesn't get that either when it's on the same time as particularly when, let's be honest, the senior England team are playing so badly. Do you want to go and watch more rugby after it? Not really. I mean, not fully. Like obviously that game was on Friday, so it was before, so there would have been some people that saw it. But you also feel like those players deserve the chance to be in the PRC, but also deserve for their tournament to be at a time when most people are going to watch it. But yeah, it's just a bit of a shame that we went. I mean, obviously they got a good win in the under-20, so they had a successful weekend. But yeah, it just would have been really nice to be able to see sort of the talent that got us to that position being able to play in it, because that I think you should be able to pick Pater for all of the games just based on that kick last week. He should have got in. He should have got in. He'd have been selected on that alone, I reckon. Let alone the fact that he's absolutely fantastic and around the pitch as well. But yeah, it was just unfortunate from that perspective. And I'm not saying it would have changed like the result or like the performance. I don't mean it from a performance perspective. I just mean it from the case of like, it just seems like bad prep, bad planning. Like they'd finally managed to sort out like the Six Nations issue with only having one break instead, so it reduces kind of the length of the tournament, the length that people are away. Like they're finally starting to put thought into it. So it just feels like they need to go one step further in terms of putting the thought into it as well. Because they made a good point on commentary. Like, there's absolutely no reason it needs to be at the same time. Like, it's irrelevant really to how that tournament goes. And if you're going to have it at the exact same time as a youth development tournament, then you're going to get these situations that just don't seem very tenable. But
it's just like just that point, isn't it? Like none of the other nations have that issue, so it's difficult for them. But it does definitely detract from the tournament, because part of the sort of exciting aspect of the tournament is you get these emerging stars playing, and you get to see them. Like, because at the end of the day, a half-baked Chiefs side versus a half-baked Saints side is hardly the most awe-inspiring fixture, is it? Like, yeah, of course it's still a Saints team, and it's still an Exeter team, but it's missing its magic, isn't it? Because it hasn't got the big stars playing. Whereas at least if you can pivot it and say, yeah, but Pater, you want to watch this youngster Pater or this youngster Lewis or whoever it may be, it adds a bit of juice to the tournament in terms of excitement and energy. But otherwise, it's just another tournament where missing its stars. And they've done a pretty good job now in terms of removing the conflicts of the Prem. So the Prem can stand well and say, look, we have got the best players playing it most weeks. It's not ideal. There are still a few, but it's not as bad as a few years in a row where we had none of our internationals for the East Midlands Derby. Like, so you're literally downgrading the biggest game in domestic rugby for the international game. It's cannibalising itself. At least it's not that stage.
Yeah.
But to put some extra sort of excitement into this tournament, I fully agree it'd be so much better if the under-26 nations wasn't at the same time. I think it'd be very hard to convince the other nations to get on board.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, certainly it isn't. And that said, I'm not even saying it thinking that there's definitely going to be an answer. Just a comment on it just is a fact. Just is a shame that someone like Payday's played so fantastically, and the others, Ollie Scholar as well, has played really well in the block. And they're not able to take it any further. To play in a semi-final of something is a big deal. And so is England. So is England under 20s, of course. Like, the pathway through there is fantastic and works really well. So why do we want them to compete with each other? But like you said, you've got so many different competing things happening. It always feels like something has to give. But yeah, the reality is, like, thinking back to the match, like I said, we just were second best in all departments, and you aren't going to win like that. I mean, you can definitely make a comment of it being reffed horribly in terms of offside. I reckon they spent 90% of their time offside, but I still don't think we get through them anyway, to be completely honest with you, even if they were onside. So, they just fronted up and they really wanted it, and they were really pushing for it. But yeah, it just is what it is, really. But I'd still say, like, overall, like a successful tournament, getting to the knockout stages as it is. But yeah, that's probably going to be a tasty match next week, to be fair. This weekend between Leicester and Exeter, actually, it's probably going to be a really good spectacle, which I think we're going to need, because I don't think the other England game's going to be.
Don't jump the gun on that conversation. Don't do it.
No. The thing is that it's never easy. Well, I know we've had some good wins down there, but it's never easy, is it? Playing down at Exeter, so it was always going to be an uphill challenge. And like you said, we all thought the boys had it in them, but it's just a shame. Is it still compulsory that the under-20s have to play? Because I remember back a few years ago, if we needed them, we could have said we need them to play for us. I don't know whether it's like a necessity.
I don't know if there is, but it's also I suppose it'd be really difficult to make the argument that we needed them.
I just meant like Pater, because he's literally been amazing through the whole
thing.
No,
sure.
It would have been nice to.
I suppose if even if that isn't part of the agreement, I think Saints don't strike me as a kind of team that'd be like, sorry, you need to come back and play for us, unless you're in a situation of like, oh, everyone's injured and we literally have no one. But I suppose with the frame of mind from Saints as well, like, they could put a team out with no issue. So are you going to call someone back from what is still international duty? Probably not. But it also may be that it is part of the agreement, very possibly. I don't know enough about it.
It was just because it was a semi-final, that's what I mean. Not a group game.
Yeah.
Because it was a semi-final, you'd think if we needed one or two of them, we could have had them. But yeah.
I think it is now potentially part of the professional game agreement, but I think either way they wouldn't do it, because
I know.
they want those players to go and develop and play in those fixtures, and they want them to be part of those pathways. And England have really sorted out their pathway system. The work that Conor O'Shea's done in terms of, he did it with Italy, and you can see the fruits that are coming from that. And then you can see that he's done exactly the same with England, and the talent in England is enormous, and that comes through that pathway system. So I think they want them to be part of those groups either way. And you're gonna put the cup into context, don't you? Like, yes, you want to go and try and win it, but you don't really want to win it at the detriment to the development of the players, because that's sort of the whole point. I think in the past they've sort of gone, all right, actually these fixtures are more important, because when there was overlap where the under-20s and the Prem and under-20s were playing in the Prem, they sort of went, oh, actually we'd rather them play a Prem game because that's better for their development. But I don't think that's the mindset anymore. I think they want them in that pathway.
Yeah.
But
it also depends. I think you're right. I also agree. It also lays into like how different teams see the competition. Like, we made it very clear from the outset, it's all about development. Like, winning the title's nice, but that was never the top point of their. I think it was Vesti had done an interview in a paper, I can't remember which one, basically saying like they still see the PRC as a successful competition this year in terms of what they were able to get out of it. Like, they're very much more on the development side of it than they are like, we must go out and win this title. And we've seen other teams, not Saints teams, but other teams in the past where they've almost made it like a be all and end all of like, we need to win the PRC because it's probably our best shot at silverware and it's not for us. So yeah, they probably are in a situation of, as long as those players are developing, whether that's in a PRC game or in an England under-20s international, it's going to be a positive for the team down the line. So yeah, I find it hard to think that they would, like I said, unless you're in like dire straits and you really need someone, but even then they probably wouldn't, as it is, to be fair. But
and like I said, I don't think they have the option anyway. I think because of that.
I have a feeling it's part of it. Yeah.
But it's also, though, that development piece is an interesting point, because I think our focus on development is making players better, putting them in environments where they're going to struggle and test their skills under pressure and in high intensity environments, etc., etc. And you see actual individual player development from a delivery point of view. Whereas I think, potentially previously in the tournament from us and other clubs look at it as a sense of, you can still develop by instilling a winning mentality. If you're in the position that potentially, Newcastle have been, getting some of these cup games in whereby you still play out a pretty strong side, but you actually get some wins on the board, is development, but it's mental development rather than skill development. So there's so many factors to consider in terms of, it's just about getting what's the best out for that group. And I think, we can talk about it. There's a few players who that's potentially their season done now. How the remainder of their season is going to be. I don't really mean this, but it's going to be carrying back, holding bags and running as opposition, etc. They're not going to be needed in the first team, so their role becomes how can I help prep the first team as best I can. I think you think of the likes of Jack Lewis and Charlie Olcock and to a lesser extent potentially Kakasau and Martin, etc. Those players who sort of they come in and been really good in this tournament. The reality is that might be their last appearance of the season, because and what they've actually done though is they've gone, well, I'm worth my spot, because if you need me, I'm here. I'm getting better. I'm going to challenge. I'm going to push. I've got a future. And in a year's time, when in Kakasau's position, for example, when James Rand's not here, I consider me, I'm a contender, and I think that's what it's helped as well. It's weird. It's like their season's almost over, but from a playing point of view, yet we're in, what are we in, March?
Yeah. You got to look at it's like I suppose Toby Tame is really the best example I could think of, like to showcase that, like what the step up can be when you put in good performances in these competitions. And I got to say as well, like I thought Martin and Kakasau over the weekend put in some ridiculous defensive tackles and defensive shifts in certain parts of the game. Like, I mean, Martin got one wrong, didn't he, with the person still in the air, but my God, he put some absolute smashes in. Like, there was still some really, there were some positive, even if the overall performance was lackluster, there were still some good things that you could see in these players, like that you can still identify. So yeah, they said it's weird to think. I mean, I'm sure they'll potentially, we know some of them play for Bedford anyway, so some of them are still going to get some experience that way. But yeah, it's strange, isn't it, to think we're in March, and for some people, you're probably not going to see them in a Saints College shirt for like the rest of the season. But I guess probably the biggest positive I took away from that game outside of it is having Langdon back. I mean, how great was that to see him back on? Like for what's that? How I can't remember how many months they said it had been.
Yes, it's this season, isn't it? He hasn't played this year.
No, he hasn't played this year. No, I think he posted on Instagram and it was like, I'm back after a long pre-season, and I was like, yeah, that probably is how that felt to him. But yeah, absolutely fantastic to see him back. So
I think there's certainly some positives as well, like the fact that we couldn't get our game on the pitch, and the reality is we couldn't get our game on the pitch. We didn't have any real shots at them, and we just didn't win some key moments, and a lot of things didn't go our way. But the defensive, because of that, we had to put a hell of a lot of defensive shots, and I thought the defense was actually pretty good. I mean, we conceded stuff, but that's because we were under kept putting ourselves under an awful lot of pressure, and for the whole, they stood up. Like that, that breakaway try where, was it Hodge just flung it out the back off the floor, whatever. That's just crazy skill. You've just got to go fair play. Like the defense can't do anything about that, but most of it, we really pushed them, made them earn the points that they did score.
Yeah, I felt like we put he's a really, really talented player for Exeter, but I feel like we put Brown Bampa under a lot of pressure. We got a fair few mistakes out of him actually, because we were putting him under pressure, targeting him because he's a massive threat. Like, I mean, he's going to be an absolute stormer for Exeter, no doubt about that. But yeah, he's a huge threat. He's fast, he's powerful, and they obviously targeted that. And yeah, we got quite a few mistakes out of him actually, under high balls or just in terms of pressure. So there were certain aspects, where it was obvious that we kind of had a plan and we executed it quite well. But like you said, there's a couple of like fluky tries in there that they got with just some crazy offloads. But I felt like, defensively, I know you say like, oh, we gave away 31 points. We did give away the 4 tries, but with the talent that they've got in that squad, it could have been a lot more, definitely.
The attacking opportunities they had, it could have been a lot more. Like I said, our defense really stood up. And I think that Brown Pampo, he's such an athlete, so fast, etc. But he's got a long way to go in terms of getting his skill levels to the level of everyone else. Like everyone's calling him for England, but I just can't. I think he's a long way off because, like we know with Hendy, raw athleticism and freak ability to beat people, etc., is amazing. But there's still those little fine details with Hendy, and I think that they're not fine details with Brown and Bampa. I think they're quite big details that he's got to get right, and that's the biggest negative, isn't it? Seeing Hendy down hurt.
Yeah. I mean that looked bad. Like, there was a lot of pain, and he was very mad. I think that happened to him. Just an accident, right? His knee just bends the wrong ways. He's tackling someone. He falls. He starts to go backwards. It just twists the wrong way. It's one of those things that you can't prevent from happening, but it's not. It's not through anyone's like fault in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, that there was not even able to put any weight on it as he's walking off and going off really slow and down for quite a long time, just holding onto his knee. Like, yeah, I'm going to assume that's probably. I think it said. Well, I know we said like, oh, March is quite early for like not playing. Some of those other players, but it's also late enough in the season that it's like I'd be surprised if he is now able to feature again. Realistically, depending on obviously we don't know what the injury is, but usually you can sort of tell like if a player's able to sort of walk it off a little bit, you think okay, like he might be out for a couple of weeks, but that looked significant, unfortunately.
Not that it's a positive, because there's no positive in injury, but it was the other knee, wasn't it? It wasn't the one he's just had sorted, so. It's not a positive, but it's not one that's going to be a recurring problem with the same leg. But like you said, he's got those bendy knees that go weird, different ways. So you never know. He might have just bent back in like Stretch Armstrong, and he'll be playing next week. Next week.
You hope it was just a real bad bang, and it's going to have
like
some
a bad
swelling.
Sting, exactly. Yeah.
It's going to have some swelling, and when that comes down, the mechanics of his knee are all in good order. It was just bloody painful. But we'll have to wait and see. I think anyone who's had a serious knee injury, as soon as you see that you get PTSD and you start really having fears. But Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood. So I really hope
Yeah.
we really want him to have a great end to the season, but because it's
Yeah.
sort of set up for a player like him, isn't it? This running,
Yeah.
he could steal it and become a star, but that was the same scenario with of Edo, wasn't it? He was set up to be a star of the Six Nations almost, and it didn't quite come out. That's the reality of professional sport.
Yeah.
Do we
And I
want
gotta
to
say,
cover
it's
off anything else? Or?
I feel like, look, I know we tried to stay Saints focused, but unfortunately there were some Saints in action at the weekend, so I guess we're just gonna have to
Yeah,
we'll have to talk about it a bit at least, because at least for Fischetti, that was probably one of the best weekends of his life, and
I
fair
was
play.
about to say, yeah, we could do positive.
You know what? Absolutely fair play,
Forza
because
Italia.
I so love watching. It was one of the reasons why I was so sad for Eduardo, because I was like, that how the team's playing right now, you just want to be around that constantly, even if he wasn't like necessarily playing all the time. He'd just want to be in that environment, because I mean, yeah, look, England would die. Everyone knows that. We could speak about that till the cows come home, but yeah, I can't deny that seeing that Italy make history was kind of softened the blow a little bit, because they're just so damn likable as well as as a team and as a unit, and kind of where they are right now, and that the camaraderie between them. Like you definitely can't deny kind of that win and how that win would have made them feel. And look, they didn't even play that amazingly, to be honest. I don't think it was a great game all around. But yeah, especially compared to the game before, that Scotland France game is going to go down in the history books as like one for the ages. What an incredible spectacle that was!
It's so annoying that France got the bonus point, like because you know Scotland going to Ireland with the Six Nations in their hands would have been such a great thing.
Yeah, and even if they get 5 points, you know, if France do, they're still, which let's be real, France probably will. I think they're still kind of, but
France can lose and still win the Six Nations. They can get a losing bonus point and try scoring bonus point and lose the game, obviously, and then they would still win the Six Nations, if Ireland win. So you've got this enormous weird scenario where Ireland can have more wins and lose the Six Nations.
Yeah,
like bonus points should not be a thing. They just shouldn't be a thing. It's ridiculous.
I suppose at least it's still interesting that you go into the final weekend and one of 3 teams can still take it. Like it's a great advert, isn't it, as a tournament? But yeah, it's I was thinking about it from a Saints perspective, like not about the performance. I'm not going to mention any of the performances specifically, because the team is just struggling right now, and anybody, like, they made so many changes and they were still struggling. So there's something endemic to that team as a whole, and from top down, like there are obviously issues in there. So I don't think it's fair to pick any one person out of Saints to be like they played well or they didn't play well. It was just the whole thing was a mess from start to finish. I just sort of more think about it of like what they're going to be feeling like when they come back, because it's going to be one of 2 things. They're either going to be so kind of jaded from that experience, or they're going to be potentially feeling like, maybe, I don't know if happy is the right word, but maybe raring to go to get back into a team that's winning, that has potential to win, which doesn't feel like what they have with England at the moment. And yeah, some of them are obviously going to come back it's going to be a very different camp for some people, isn't it? Like, you know, Fischetti's going to be coming back in. That's going to have been a great 8 weeks for him, and it's going to be the direct opposite for a very large contingent of Saints guys that are coming back. It's not. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic when they come back, and you know, it can still get worse from here, because I don't foresee a win against France in France this weekend. So who knows what they're going to be feeling like, you know, when they come back, which is a shame, because they're so talented, and they all got, and I say this about, I think, to be honest, most of the England team, not just Saints players, like there's so much insane talent in there right now, and it just feels like they're being almost like handicapped by the way that they're being told to play. And so I wonder, yeah, it's going to be interesting, you know, how Douse manages that, because they've mentioned before about how difficult it is managing when you come back in from an international camp, but you've also then got the added dynamic that none of them are coming back happy with how the games went, the results went, the whole tournament went. So you've got that added, you know, when the Lions players came back, except for Finn and Henry had admittedly been disappointed they weren't able to feature more, you know, the others came back on a Lions tour win, and you know, they had that kind of positive aspect that, you know, the players from England are going to be coming back in a very different place to where they were after that Lions tour. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how that is managed and how they all come back and how they're all feeling.
You know, you realise England are possibly playing for the wooden spoon. this weekend, aren't they? That's just doesn't even sound feasible, does it? Especially the way we absolutely annihilated Wales. But if Wales can somehow get a result, yeah, England finished bottom.
I mean,
I think
I don't think Wales will get the result for starters, but at the same time, like they're almost like on the weirdly enough on like the flip side to England, like their past two performances from the past 2 weeks have been actually really solid and really good.
Yeah.
And England have gone the opposite way. Like that performance at the weekend, I actually thought was really, really good. Like that Reece,
The win. The prop
that Reece
down the
carriage
wing.
was actually a thing of like beauty.
yes,
But they're getting better right now. Like I'm they've got Steve Tandy obviously had come in and had inherited like a horrible situation, like in terms of what was happening off the field with what was going on in Wales, not even what was happening on the field. And you've seen such a vast almost beating Scotland, like some of the great stuff they did at the weekend. Like they're almost on like literally the diametrically opposed kind of journey that England seem to be on right now.
It's exactly opposite because like the Welsh talent pool just isn't there, right? They've got their domestic game in such a poor position. The talent pool just isn't there, and for so long, Shaun Edwards and Gatland were able to. As soon as they pulled on a Welsh jersey, they were 10 times the player. They went from being a mouse to a lion overnight, right? They got that Welsh spirit, that dragon, that fire. They were incredible, right? And that disappeared when Shaun Edwards disappeared, in my view. That seems to be coming back. Like they don't have the greatest talent pool. The 15 that they put out there is not challenging almost any other 15. If you were there's very few players in that 15 that are getting to any other side in that Six Nations pool. But they've got that spirit back. They've got that Welsh dragon back. They're fighting. If England had played, if it had been reverse fixtures and England had played Wales in the last round, going in the same scenario, oh wow, like you're very much in a wooden spoon contest there, because I'm sure the Welsh spirit and the daffodils would be out and the bread of heaven and etc. And I think I would probably back Wales purely from a mental point of view, whereas England have got all the talent, all the resources, all the facilities, and they're nowhere near, right? And I think the mantra that you hear from the players says it all. They ask. Ben Earl, who's been great for England, is a great player. He's one of probably the few players that does put his performance out there on a regular basis. Yeah. But they're talking to him about last result, etc., and he said, well, we're going to go back to being what we're good at. We're going to be the hardest team in the world to beat. I mean, the mindset's bang on wrong, isn't it? Hard to beat. That's not a go out and win mentality. That's a go out and negative, isn't it? It's not the positive go win games rugby, and that seems to be that's a leadership, that's a vision, that's a discussion point. That's not a let's teach this player how to hit a tackle bag. That's get these boys in the right mindset so they can go out and play attacking, winning rugby. You get Saints in a last 5 minutes, 12 points down. The mindset is we can still win this. If your whole mindset is let's be really difficult to beat, when you get into that position, well, being difficult to beat is not helping you, is it?
No. And I think it was, I might be wrong, I think it was Ben Youngs, but there was quite a few different pundits that said stuff after, so I might be misattributing it, but whoever it was had basically said, they went in to not lose, they didn't go in to win, because that felt like, and look, I think I'm going to mention it, even though I think it's been absolutely blown out of proportion. I don't think it meant anything that people said. But I think it is also kind of typified by Marrow shouting at Finn when they were trying to make the decision of do we go for 3 or do we go for the corner? And the fact that there were those discussions, like, it is literally the mentality of some of the players that have, like Marrow and some of the others who have been playing for the past few weeks and losing. They're probably in the mindset of, I don't want to lose another. We cannot lose another. And so their perspective is, how do we not lose this match? And then you've got all the players that have come in who have been watching that from the sidelines, and they're probably thinking, how do we win this? We need to go out and win this. And that's the difficulty they're having in the camp at the moment, that you've got this thing of, you can't go in not to lose. And definitely not against a team because Italy went in to win. Like, of course they did, because it was like a history-making thing. They're playing absolutely phenomenal rugby right now. Like, they're on an absolute high. Like, It turns out they didn't quite perform on the field as well as they have in previous weeks, certainly, but they went in to win. They had the belief that they could, and you never kind of got that sense from England. It was a case of, how do we save this tournament in terms of results? So I was like, you need to throw that out. In my mind, they should have thrown that out the window, really. You shouldn't be thinking of, how do we kind of save this, because it's gone. It was already gone. So going in with this thing of like, well, we can't lose another, we need to make sure we don't lose. I was like, that's gone. We're past that. Like, because the tournament has left the building. The trophy's left the building. You can't. You're no longer fighting for that in any way, shape, or form. So like, you need to go in with a little bit of a different attitude. And like I said, I think that shouting thing got blown out of proportion. They literally sorted it out like 2 minutes later. They were like chummy again. So I don't think it really. But I think just in of itself, like this kind of not sure what decision to go for, and the captain probably just being frustrated, generally speaking, is how it's going at the moment. Like in terms of the past few weeks and thing, kind of boiled over, I think, just in the moment. But I think it just kind of typifies that they don't really know where they are or why. Like, I think Mara, to be fair, was excellent in his post-match interview. He's like, if we knew why, we'd have fixed it. They really are. I think you do get the sense that, like, the players at least are trying to figure it out. They just don't have the answers, and I don't know what the answer is really. I don't think they know what the answer is. I think I do feel sorry for Mara a bit, because he said in the interview that this whole result and the performances is on me as captain. I'm like, it's not. I get why you feel that way, because you're captain and you feel like you have to shoulder that responsibility, but it's not really. Like, it's got to be on individual players. It's got to be on the coaching staff. It's got to be, yes, on the captain slightly, but I feel like he's so bogged down in taking responsibility for it, bless him. And I just felt so sorry for him in the interview afterwards, because I was like, there are other things that contribute to what is going on in camp right now. Like, you are not the sole person like responsible, but at the same time, it made me realise that in that sense, he is a really good captain in terms of like off the field, in terms of, this is my responsibility, we need to get better. Like, he doesn't beat around the bush at all. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't know what the answers are, and they're certainly not going to find them before this weekend, I don't think. But yeah, that's really the main thing from a Saints perspective, is how they're going to be feeling sort of when they come back, because that's going to be a really tough situation all round. And I mean, the funny thing was, is during the game, I reckon Fischetti got into actual fights with his teammates repeatedly. It was like an intentional thing. It was so funny to me. But they'll be absolutely best pals when they all get back in. But yeah, it's a frustrating time to be an England fan at the moment. Which is why the result of the weekend for Saints was unfortunate, because I'd have loved to been able to see them make it to a final, no matter what the result would have been. But yeah, it really makes me excited for the Prem coming back, because that's what's the main thing that's frustrating about England, right? The Prem week by week is like an incredible, exciting product, and they can't seem to figure out how to replicate that at international level, despite the fact that I think if you could find a way to do it, like, you'd have a ridiculously good team on your hands. Like, you probably would have a difficult to beat team, but you could probably say that with a straight face. But yeah, I'm just like, I don't normally say bring on, I'm so excited to have the Newcastle game back, because it's not always the most exciting, but my God, I can't wait for it to be here, honestly.
No, it's I won't comment too much, because I've already been told. It's just sad to see, like you said, the amount of talent that's on that pitch in that squad in the Premiership, and we just, yeah. He's been given the, as what they'd say in football, the dreaded confidence, hasn't he? Where they said, "Oh yeah, he's okay." Yeah, we'll see, but it's just been absolutely dire. So everyone's like, "Oh, we got a chance of winning this Six Nations. We could win this Six Nations. We're up there level with." No way. Look at them now. You know what would be quite funny? We could actually, all this absolute awful play, we could go over to France and win. That'd be just hilarious. That's a typical England thing to do.
I mean, to be honest, it's like England would need to be a lot better, but I've got to tell you, if the France of the first like 50-60 minutes against Scotland show up, who knows? Because my God, they were genuinely, for portions of that game, awful. I don't know what was going on. Like I said, you put them under pressure and they just lost their minds a little bit. They were just doing, I think even the ref had said to them, it was like, I think he was quite with them at one point. He said something that's really funny. He was like, "You've got to stop doing this. Like, you're under pressure and you keep doing this. You've got to go. You've got to kind of figure it out."
French, don't they? That's the thing. Like, as soon as Sean Edwards has gone in there, they've like become so un-French, in the sense of they're just like so consistent, so aggressive, so like unplayable, and then they've sort of gone back to their roots in that Scotland game of like just being so blasé about, oh yeah, we just rock up to Scotland and beat them. Oh wait, no, Scotland don't agree with that. So,
Yeah.
and you sort of, but yeah, the thing is, Simon, like, we're definitely not trying to clip your wings in terms of.
No,
It's
no,
just
no, no.
we all think the same, and I think it's fair to say that, like, I think of the vast majority of people now are starting to agree with comments that both you and me have said for quite a while, in the sense of like the leadership within the England group is not delivering and hasn't delivered a good England team for quite a while. And if you expect, I've been very open in saying that I support Australia, and I therefore are very keen on Borthwick to stay, because it will mean that you are not a contender in the next World Cup. But like, honestly, there's so many better choices. That England should have the best coaching group, in the world, because they've got all the resources, all of them. No one else in world rugby has what England have in terms of being backed, and therefore that comes with the need to get results.
Do you know what I saw the
Yeah.
other day? I saw an interview, and someone, I think it might have been Ben Youngs actually. He said someone like your guy, Michael Cheika. He said he'd be brilliant at them with that talent. He'd get
Yeah,
them playing amazing.
Checker you'd win the World Cup. Like, I honestly think that. Like, I think that's what England are missing, is a genuinely world class coach. I think if you put any of those coaches who have been successful at the upper echelons of the game into that environment, they would win. And I honestly think if you put someone who's been proven successful over a long period of time in the domestic game, someone like Ronan Nagara, into that position, you'd have a better chance than the current scenario. That would be my view of it.
I do think it's interesting.
Oh,
I think it's interesting though how people see it has kind of changed a bit. So I think for a while, for like the first sort of after the sort of like the second loss, I think a lot of people were like, oh, it's because of this player and that player, which I never quite thought was necessarily fair. But funnily enough, I feel like it sort of changed after this week, because they brought in, what was it, 9 changes or whatever that they made, and the result and the performance was still the same. That people are starting to realise that actually it can't just be these individual players; it's got to be more than that. But yeah, certainly interesting that they said they do the. I almost feel like saying that you've still got confidence in him is like the most terrifying thing he should be hearing right now, because like you said, this is not the first time this would have happened across a different sport. Like, I look, irrespective of whether you agree that he should be staying until summer or not, which I think is ridiculous. Why would you choose that as your time scale? You then give yourself a year for it, which seems ridiculous. But like, I just don't see how you can lose 4 out of assuming we lose this weekend. Like I said, it'll be absolutely hysterical if we manage to somehow win. But let's just go on the assumption that on paper and on the field right now, we don't win that match. I don't see how you come out of a Six Nations winning 1 out of 5 and expect
Jess,
to still keep your job.
four Six Nations attempts by England,
Yeah.
and they've not won one. 4 Six Nations, right? And you can say all you want about, oh, we picked up a dead duck after Eddie, right? Eddie won Six Nations. He won you tournaments. He got you to a World Cup final. You can say all you want about man management and how he was too rough with the players or whatever. That mentality would deliver better than what you currently got.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there's all sorts of things. I mean, dragging it back to Saints a bit, because I think you covered the point. I think about we've always struggled with these players coming back into the after the Six Nations, and Austin Healy said did actually explain it really, or not explained it, but he made the real good point the weekend, is that if you're Fischetti, I mean, as soon as he puts on a blue shirt, he becomes an absolute world beater, doesn't he? And he's been so good this tournament. He must be having the time of his life. So coming back to Northampton, he probably doesn't want to. He probably wants the journey to keep going. He'll be on such a high that he'll want that to come on. It'll be so hard for him to step away from that environment, because it will be such a great place to be. Not that Saints is a bad place to be, but he'll be absolutely joyous. Whereas
top of the league.
Yeah, whereas the other boys who in the England camp, it'll be like coming home. Coming back to where they're valued, coming back to where they've had success, coming back to their own home, comforts or whatever. And it might be that they need a break still because of the mental challenge of the whole thing. but they'll be probably really have come back with a lot of enthusiasm to get back on the horse in the Saints colours.
Yeah.
Whereas, when you come back off a high, it's harder to sort of recalibrate yourself and jump back in and go again with that. So the balance for every person will be so individually designed, won't it? You can't just go like every single England player gets a week off. But, it'll be some will get a week off, some won't get a week off, but they'll get a few weeks off in a few weeks. They'll have to where each player is mentally is almost more important than where they are physically, because they'll all be in good shape still.
It does sound like the team have done that before. I remember, I think it was Dallas had basically talked about how the experience even coming back from the Lions, even though it was a winning tour, like the 4 guys that came back, or however many it was, each of them had a different, a different experience of that tour, right? So even them coming back in, he was very open that it had been quite disappointing for Smith and Pollock in particular, whereas for Tommy playing in all of the tests, it had been a very different experience of that, and that you have to manage. It's got to be such a difficult job. I don't envy them at all, to manage players individually, but then you still have to somehow manage how it still works in a team environment too, having to weigh both of those up. And usually we get a lot of people that sometimes, a lot of Saints fans sometimes, that somebody will come back in and they'll go, well, why is this player rested? He didn't play that many minutes. I said, but you don't know how they're feeling having come back. So Finn Smith, for example, will have only played 2 matches. If they lose this weekend, that guy's coming back really dejected. Maybe what he needs is a week off. Maybe what he doesn't need is a week off. They will understand individually how to do that. So sometimes I sort of wish when people come back from tournaments and people are like, why is this person having a rest or whatever? I'm like, you don't know what that took out of them from a mental load standpoint. I feel like we forget that quite a lot. I feel that as well with some of the discourse, this goes away from Saints for a second, but it does have a link, the discourse around Marrow and what Marrow has been through over the past 6 months, a bit more really, going on a Lions tour, then becoming the captain when the original captain Doris gets injured. You have to shoulder that responsibility. Then you come back, then he's got the highs of getting married, the lows of losing his mum. There's got to be an element where we talk about the burnout from a mental capacity. These players might be fine physically when they come back, but that doesn't mean that they're in the headspace that they need to be. Like I said, that's going to be individual. So if Finn Smith comes back and he's like, I really just want to play against Newcastle, it's what I need. Perfect. If it's not, perfect. That has to work out individually for them. For example, there are some that are not going to, right? Fischetti will have played, assuming he's going to play again, he'll have played in every match. There's a 0% chance that he comes back and plays, right? But there are some of those players that are going to be on the borderline in terms of number of minutes, and you really just have to have a sit down with them and be like, what is it that you need in this moment? And so there's no right or wrong answer. So sometimes when people jump on, why are we giving this person a rest, or why are we playing this person? Should they not need a rest? I was like, I promise you, they've had discussions between them and the coaches. They know how to figure it out.
It's not necessarily they know what they need either. It's about the expert making the decision. Yeah, sorry.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was going to say, wouldn't Italy wouldn't count, would it? It's only the England players that have to do.
Yeah, but he still played those minutes. He still be on that high. It's a case of we pay his wages. We have the the right to play him. But it's about making the right decision that the after one game, for the rest of the season, we need him firing. So you got to make the decision to get the best out of him for the club in the long term, not just the Newcastle game.
To be fair, Manny will be firing, won't he? Manny will be firing. I mean, he hasn't played.
Is it just an England thing, or is it an international level thing now about the number of minutes? Is that not a World Rugby thing? I don't really know, but
I don't think World Rugby has installed that across the board.
They may not,
but I think it's 100% an England thing.
I know it definitely is an England thing.
Yeah.
Because we had that thing, didn't we? Of they told us we couldn't play Tommy for the European final, and it's like, well, we will. We have to.
Sensible decisions get made, don't they? Really, but
But like you said, Fischetti will have played so many minutes, started all of those matches. Even if you don't have to, there is no chance. I don't even know if that would be the right or fair thing to make him play. Like you said, he's, for all we know, he wants to take a week's celebratory trip with his teammates. For all I know, for all any of us should really care about. That's going to be fully up to them. But there are going to be different players are going to need different things. like you've got Mitchell, for example, who had the injury, but I did see him walking around fairly freely when I was at the Saints last at the Saracens game. So I don't think it's something specifically long term. So, you might see him back in against Newcastle because you need it. Like, they're all going to have, like you said, either they're going to know themselves, or like you said, in some cases they're really not. But it's someone's job to be like, look, we think you need another week before you come back in, or yeah, we think this person is fit and ready to go. Because I think we all forget. I think sometimes people think, well, players just play once a week, so how is it really taking that much out of them mentally? I was like, no, it's a full-time, every day of the week thing to train, to go through review processes, to get yourself ready, to pick yourself back up. Like, players talk about it all the time. I can remember Tom Wood, just before he retired, he basically said, I know that I need to retire when I still haven't fully recovered for the next game, like whether that's physically, but like, we're so much more understanding these days of the mental side of playing sports, being in the spotlight, having to do this week in, week out, that it's such a huge consideration these days. So some players are going to be ready for Newcastle, some aren't. Some physically won't be allowed to play anyway. Like Tommy, for example, is good at, with Coles probably has played enough minutes that they'll both definitely be no's. So
it's a physical thing, it's a mental thing. It's an elite performance sport in the sense of they will make the decisions to get the best performance out of the individuals based on a million factors. Saying they play one game a week is like saying, Formula One, all it is the guy jumps in a car and drives around a track. Well,
exactly. Yeah.
If that's the case, why do they have over 1,000 employees at these companies? Like, right, for that one car or those two cars to go around a track at the weekend, it's elite level performance. And
I mean, there's a reason that sports teams and even athletes in like single player sports, like tennis is a really good example. Like the amount of them these days that are very open in across different sports, but having sports psychologists as like full-time members of staff, etc. Like, it's shifted. It is no longer just, you're not just putting your body on the line physically, but like I said, there is a mental load to carry. And like that's the same whether it's a really good thing or a bad thing. So like for Sketty, his mental load is going to be really high, just in a much different way to the mental load of the others, right? From the England perspective, like it's just heavy mental load in different ways.
And to hit the performances that he's hit in the Six Nations for Sketty, he's had to go to depths of absolute below the level that anyone else would go to, and a normal person would go to. He's to get there is digging deep. Like, the mental strain to put in that level of physicality over that long period of time takes its toll. Like you got to go, to the absolute darkest areas of hell to be able to put those performances in, week out.
Yeah.
And that will have a natural mental drain, and it's so, the physicality of the sport now is so imposing and so draining that they're not recovered, they're not ready for the next game until Thursday.
No. I remember, I think whether it was Douse who was talking about a play about 10 years ago, so you imagine the physicality's got even more. They said they put some measurement vests on a player, and they said during a match it was like being hit by a car 3 times at 30-40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But this was a flanker, obviously, who's taking loads more tackles, but that's 10 years ago. These boys are a lot bigger now and a lot fitter, so you can imagine how much the fatigue on their body is. And the scrum. Sorry, just quickly, you talk about Sketty. Yeah. That's the annoying thing that annoyed me about that match. England actually had them in the scrum at the start. For the first 20, 30 minutes, we were getting penalties. Like, this is the best scrum in the Six Nations, and England actually was stuffing them.
Did really well.
We just couldn't do nothing with it.
Yeah.
No.
But the mental capacity to get hit by a car 3 times and to volunteer to do it again, to willingly get hit by a car 3 times, like the depth of hell you've got to go to keep putting yourself back in that position, like it's such a strain, such a drain, and like
I mean,
people really need to realise that's the case for the game as it is at the moment.
Outside of the England game, though, like it's working for Fischetti, isn't it? Because that scrum is like a thing of beauty when it's going. Like watching their scrum against France was like incredible. It was like such a good. And I don't normally. It's not that I don't care about scrums. It's just I wouldn't say it's like my favourite aspect of the game. But there's something about watching him always making sure that they're number threes for so many different teams getting penalised, because he's just at them from like minute one. Like it is a thing of of like beauty, and like we're seriously getting to a time, like I don't just mean it about Fischetti necessarily, but to a stage where I don't know if you've ever been here before outside of maybe Parise, where there's players in that Italian squad that I actually think they walk into most other squads in the world. Like Menoncello right now should
Yeah.
walk into most squads in the world.
He's
Like that
He's
guy
off
is
to Toulouse, isn't he?
unreal. But yeah, he's
Yeah,
going to Toulouse. So he's
their
only
centres are good. Yeah,
he's only going to get. There's no way he gets anything other than better going and playing in a team like
Well,
Toulouse.
the thing is, the Italian teams aren't rubbish anymore. Like back in the day, they weren't very good. Whereas Benetton are a good side, and all of that squad either play in the French league or the Premiership.
or
So they're
yeah,
always going to be getting better and better because they're playing with better players. That
I think it
like you
was.
said, some of them players are just class.
I
They're
think
just class.
I think it was some of what I felt was like a little bit disrespectful with the discourse after like we lost to them. It was like, oh, losing to Italy is a new low. I was like, excuse me, this is a really, really good side. Like, sure,
They-
sure, losing to them for the first time ever isn't. I'm not saying it's a good thing. Like, obviously not. But like, so much of the discourse was like, you shouldn't be losing to this team. We never lose this team. It's such a big low. I was like, you're totally, totally discarding like the insane levels of improvement that you've had. I'm not saying it doesn't take away from the fact that like losing to them to the first time is never a good thing to have as like, to be in that England squad that loses to Italy for the first time. Don't get me wrong. But I'm like, we need to put a little bit more respect on how good that team is right now.
Yeah, no, they are really good and they're performing really well. And Quesada's just clearly a top coach. And I think having a coach
Yeah.
similar culturally makes a big difference. But
Yeah.
I also, and like I said, Conor O'Shea, the work he does in developing pathways is clearly
Yeah.
excellent. But what I would also say, though, just to caveat that slightly, is yes, Benetton are now a decent enough team and they go all right in the URC. But if Saints got drawn against Benetton in the Champions Cup, I would fully expect us to beat them and do well against them. Like it's not
Yeah.
like they're now Leinster,
Oh
like
no, I didn't mean
but
that.
but no, but you know what I mean. Like yes, there is, and the problem is you get fans who only watch Six Nations, so they watch Italy every year and they're naff. They shouldn't be in the tournament, and then you get to the point when they're beating England and you're like, oh, how that's awful. But there's a big level of growth between when people said they shouldn't be and where they are now. But it's not like they're so good that I would back Saints to beat Benetton 10 out of 10.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
No,
So
yeah.
I mean,
so
it's-
Yeah,
England,
definitely. Yeah,
England
definitely.
being formed of English teams should be beating an Italian
No,
side
I mean,
formed of
my
Benetton 10 out of 10.
my argument isn't that they shouldn't, or that they. I still think they should and could have. They should have beaten Italy and they could have beaten Italy, but like I'm also wasn't surprised that they didn't, if that makes sense, just because of where Italy are right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that wasn't a surprising to me, and maybe it was just me. It's not like I go looking at the bookies numbers very often, well, ever. But like to me, I always had Italy as the favourites to win that game in Italy, like just based on where the two teams were. Now, not to say that I didn't think England could win. I always thought if England were able to put the game on the park that we know that they should be able to based on the talent, they would beat Italy. But everyone was acting like it was some gigantic surprise. And I was like, it isn't as big a surprise as. But no, you're right. Like, still on a domestic level, because Saints are playing much better than England are in terms of the way they play. Like, yeah, you'd still put your money on 100%. Yeah.
did you get that on? I was going to say, did you say that from the form England are in, or did you make that decision before the tournament started? Jess.
I mean, the form comes into it, don't get me wrong, but I would have said before the Six Nations, like Italy have the ability to beat any of the teams in this tournament. Like, not that I thought that they would, because I didn't realistically. I mean, the only thing I realistically thought was like Wales are not going to win any matches, and I think that still stands, even though Wales are getting better. But
I think if you pick it on form, it's it's the correct call. Italy
yeah,
beating England on form without a shadow of doubt, and they did. So yeah, they did. But
yeah,
if you were Michael Cheika coming in and picking up an England squad, and you had the option to also pick Italians into that same squad, your squad would probably be 95% English.
yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
the talent pool in England is a lot stronger.
Yeah.
That's if you're picking it on paper, it's 10 out of 10 England win. why is that not case, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
But then
that's
they
the
said,
question we can chuck out into the world and let
no,
other
but I
people
just
work
think
it
it
out. But
fully goes back to like the coaching setup, because like to not be able to unlock what we know English talent is capable of is ridiculous to me. Like you've got loads of Saints players in that. When they picked loads of Saints players, like in the thing, when I think like the 7 got called up, I thought, oh great, this is going to be good because they're going to pick them because they want the strengths that they give. And then they basically did everything they could to strip those strengths away from them. Like, some of the criticism that like Freeman has got, I was like, well, what's he supposed to do if he's not getting the ball? They're not able to get possession and keep possession, and they seem to have this thing of like kick, don't keep hold of it, put them under pressure by kicking, all this kind of stuff. I was like, you just don't, and it's not even just Saints players. I think there are like some other teams out there, like even like a Bath side that can play some crazy good fast rugby. I said, you're just not unlocking what these players do week in, week out. And actually some of the teams in the Prem, some of the top teams play not totally similar, but some similar styles in some ways. Like you have a blueprint for sort of how to do it, but he's just got it in his head that this is the way that you have to do it. It isn't working. And I think that's why I think, like I said, like a lot of the conversation has changed from, oh, let's pick out this individual player that didn't play very well, to kind of, well, actually, he's made almost whole scale changes. The result, the performance, everything looked the same, which is dross. And so now we have to have a question of actually, what is it that isn't working in terms of getting out of those players what we see week on week. But I probably still would have picked England before the tournament. I certainly wasn't picking England to win that based on the form of the past couple of weeks. No, I'd have been more surprised if England had won that game than Italy, to be completely honest with you.
That's
Based
what I
on the
was
form
just
going
checking,
into it.
because obviously I was totally the same. I thought
Yeah.
we probably could lose. We should probably lose this one because of the way we're playing.
But I was still realistically. I was just saying, I was still realistically probably saying that Italy would have come above Wales and maybe not anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to what Charles, I think we talked about last week, saying that Borthwick, what he took over them at the road, didn't he? And they won the league, but it was not. I'm not disrespectful here. You know my thoughts. It wasn't on anything he really did. They already had like a good squad, and that's the problem. I think he's very old school, and like we were saying, if you put him as a forwards coach or a lineouts coach, you have the best lineout probably around. But he's not. He's not a coach. You can't put him managing players that play for the Saints, because he's total negativity compared to how we play. It just doesn't work. What's the point of picking them? Like Roebuck's an astonishing winger. He just doesn't get the ball. What's the point? What's the point of having wingers that can run if you're not having the ball? It's just it's so frustrating. And the fact we're fighting for a wooden spoon is just, all the other nations must be laughing, including Australia.
Well, the funny thing is this weekend, like Ireland and Scotland are our biggest fans.
Yeah,
because they need us to win. So we're going to have more people on our side this weekend than we've ever had, and I still don't think it's going to matter. But
I think the Scots would still rather England lose than them win a championship.
Yeah,
so
I think you're right.
I think you're right.
They would take that. Yeah.
But anyway, it'll be exciting. Hopefully, last weekend. But either way,
no Saints action specifically.
Yeah, interesting. But anyway, negative week. We've got to have one every now and then.
I'll tell you what. I suppose a positive thing I did want to think about that just popped into my head because we're talking about centres is, I think I'd already mentioned that I think Rory and Litch had really good games, but I think even the commentators have said, it's got to be a good Scotland side if you're keeping Rory out. Like they were very complimentary about Rory, that he's one of those. It's like he's just so unlucky that where Scotland are right now, like who do you replace in terms of Tuipulotu and Jones? Well, neither of them, if we're being completely honest. I think they were both really, really good at the weekend. But he makes a good point that I absolutely love Rory, and that it's great that it means we get to have him back at the Saints. So I can't really complain from that perspective, and I do think he was really good. But yeah, the commentators did say it's got to be a good side to keep him out because he is just ridiculously talented.
His biggest issue is it's not because I'm a big fan of him and he's improved immensely in all aspects of his game, but is obviously his ability to create space is as good as anyone in the world. But his biggest issue is the balance of that Scottish midfield. He's not necessarily competing with Tuipulotu in the in that 12 jersey, or Hugh Jones in the 13 jersey. He's just as much competing with Finn Russell in the 10 jersey, because it's the balance across the three.
Yeah,
like
100%,
he brings a lot of what Finn brings. So Finn's your 10, you're not, getting the balance. And when he has played for Scotland, he ends up just running that 13 channel not getting the skills that he's got into the game.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so it's like he's just unlucky with this Scottish generation of, you know,
100%.
an Aussie and a Safa in the midfield for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although, be it,
Yeah.
he's English. So
You know what it'll be? He's another Christian Day. Quality
Yeah.
player at the wrong time in the wrong position, because Christian Day never got capped.
It's not even that. Like, sometimes you can just get, and I've always thought this about. I thought about it when we were watching Saints versus Exeter. I sort of thought it about Henry Slade, right? Because I thought he was really good for Exeter. But I was like, he's another one of those where I'm like, domestically, like week in week out for Exeter, I actually think he's one of their best players. I think he can be one of the best players in the league. I think he's so talented. It just doesn't translate to international. For me, it hasn't anyway. There isn't anything intrinsically wrong with that. Like sometimes there are players like where it just doesn't like, and Alex Waller, for example, like one of the best we'll ever have. Just players generally speaking, and it just never. He was never selected because other players just had proven themselves internationally. Like I feel sometimes we forget that like you're allowed to be a really, really, really good player. It just doesn't mean that you naturally have to make that step up. I just feel like for Rory, I think, like you said, if they didn't have the talent they had in that Scotland in the Scotland setup, sorry, I think he would have made the step up. But he said he's just come around at a time when like there is some crazy good Scottish talent out there right now, and it's just a difficult thing. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that they did say that, you know, it's got to be a good side to keep a guy that talented out. But lovingly, we get to see him back at Saints, and because he hasn't, you know, he'll be there, I should imagine, for the Newcastle game because he's here, he's been playing, he's ready to go. So, but yeah, no Saints game this weekend. So I think all I hope for is all the Saints international players from all the teams to stay injury free, because I know that Miller Mills unfortunately got injured. The rest of them could stay safe, stay healthy, and come back to us in good condition. That would be lovely.
Yeah, if the Saints Black boys could get on a train up to Northampton and watch the England game from the sevens, that would be preferable to watching them. You know, but anyway, brilliant, everyone. Thanks for listening. We've had a lot to cover there, and I think we've all bit our lip well enough. We haven't hopefully offended anyone. Although I think one day we'll just unleash Simon and get ourselves cancelled. But thanks for listening. I've been Charles. Jess has been Jess. Simon's been Simon. Thank you very much.
Bye.